And a very pleasant Monday afternoon as we kick off another edition of One on One. And joining me is Varun Krishna, CEO of Rocket Companies. Varun, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you saying yes. I know you have no shortage of requests, as I very quickly found out watching you on many of the major television networks. What has the last month been like for you in terms of media coverage and all the deals you've been making? Has it been a whirlwind? Been able to stay in your seat?
It feels awesome. I think I'm new to the space. I'm new to mortgage. And so I think for me, I feel just grateful and blessed that, we get to be a part of something transformational. And it's great to see the reaction from the ecosystem, from the community. And it's great to be able to tell our story and talk to the world about what we want to do to build, a better housing industry for everybody. And so it feels great to kind of connect the cause and purpose of my company with partners who want to be along the journey and to be able to tell our story to media, to the community, to the clients, and to the partners that we serve. And so it's exciting. It's a privilege. Sometimes you run on a little bit of adrenaline here and there, but it's been really fun. And
I have a big goal here. My goal is to not ask you most of the questions you've already been asked. That's my goal. I'm not going to ask you about the stock price. I'm not going to ask you about a lot of the things you've been asked. I want to take this in a different direction and get to know you a little bit, because I did a lot of research. I think you went to college in Canada, but beyond that, given how great you are with tech, I'm surprised I was not able to find more out about you. So whoever's handling, what has happened in your personal life up to this point and all the great things you've done has done a really good job. I commend them. But are you from Canada originally?
I am. Yeah, I'm Canadian. I was actually born in India, but I moved to Canada when I was 8 years old with my family and grew up there and went to school there. And then I relocated to the U.S. right out of college for my first job.
2 decades of industry experience in building consumer platform strategies, Intuit, PayPal, Microsoft, Groupon. What a journey it's been. Is AI far beyond your wildest imagination from if you think back to when you started in the tech space, or did you always know we'd get to a place like this?
I don't think I always knew really anything. I mean, I think it's funny, I think earlier in your life and career, you probably have more self-confidence around where you think the world is going. And so you sort of build these 3-year plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. I don't know if you recall that in our earlier years, we're always taught to kind of have this plan. And I think just as my career progressed, I felt like I knew less and less, not more and more. And so you start to be a little more opportunistic and just pay attention to the way the world is swirling. And then you sort of figure out your bets. So I would say no, I had no idea where we would be today or and frankly, a lot of it has just been, a part of the motion of the ocean, so to speak, and riding the wave. And so I think what's important is that we really have to be aware of just where things are going and try to figure out, look, if the current is flowing in your way, you want to swim faster. If the current is flowing against you, you probably don't want to swim against it, right? And so just getting better at trying to understand signals and then distilling signal from noise has been more of my philosophical approach. I've never been the guy who sort of sees 5-10 years ahead and says, oh, this is where things are going to happen.
Well, it's tough. It's tough. When someone talks about a 3-year plan, I'm like, that changes every day. It's really hard to have a 3-year plan. At the same time, I know you have goals, and you wouldn't be making the moves you're making as an organization if you did not see that there was market share ahead to be had. So as you look out and as you forecast, how much market share do you think is there for the taking? I mean, do you think there's a day when Rocket can have 10, 15, 20% market share?
I mean, I think for us, the way we think about it is very simple. It's just that the market itself is huge, right? When you think about home ownership in totality, it's like a $5 trillion TAM. There's just not a lot of markets that have that T number in front of it. Mortgage itself, as you think about that, I mean, that's anywhere from sort of 1.5 to $2 trillion, right? and that gets me excited just because like housing is 20% of the GDP. So I see unlimited upside. If you think about Rocket relative to competitors, like the top 10 players put together have something like 23% of the originations. And Rocket in just 24 alone, we originated more home loans than any other lender, and we didn't even reach 10% of the market. So to me, the upside potential is huge. But I also would say, like, you have to think differently about your growth strategy. The growth doesn't necessarily come from the mortgage experience. It also comes from servicing, from recapture, from participating in the home ownership experience, from enabling realtors, enabling brokers, building a developer ecosystem, right? Like, just the maturity of thinking like a platform is how you start thinking about, in my view, more of sort of that nonlinear growth approach where you expand your growth from the single digits to the double digits to potentially higher and higher levels. I learned a lot about this from my time at Intuit, where we built TurboTax that effectively has 50-ish% market share in the DIY category of tax preparation, and it's a similar sort of construct where the industry is just highly fragmented. And so the approach to growth, you have to think about not just software, but services. You have to think about enabling ecosystems. You have to think differently about data. And, just to your earlier point around data and AI, I mean, like, here we are at this precipice. But what I think other people don't realize is that change journey will likely continue, right? Like, the way software and services are built is likely going to be very different. Things like advancements in materials engineering, robotics, 3D printing are likely going to be places where AI technologies start to have, a force multiplier of impact. And what's that going to do for housing, right? And so a lot of it, I think, when you think about growth to those higher, sort of more stratospheric levels, you have to start looking at a much bigger picture, and a part of that is why we focused on Mr. Cooper, Redfin, because we wanted to play a bigger role in home ownership. And I think that speaks to a grander view of where we think the world is heading.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you mentioned recently 60 million call logs that your system is plowing through. I think it's something like 300,000 conversations a week, saving 800,000 man hours annually with what you've built. I'm curious to know, with the 800,000 man hours that you're able to forego, that frees up a lot of room and space for your people to innovate. Well, some people will say, well, you're going to replace people with that, and they might take that angle. Like, I'm sure that you're just going to be more productive with those people. So, I mean, how does that technology and those strides you're making free up the innovative minds at Rocket?
Yeah, I think the objective is to let computers and technology do what they do best, and to sort of let humans do what they do best. And the fundamental thesis is that home ownership is one of, if not the most sort of emotional journey that the average consumer will go through in their lifetime. It's expensive, it's manual, it's inefficient, it's time consuming. And so the idea is that, AI very specifically should take things that are very routine and very repetitive and completely automate them. It should take, deterministic flows of data, of money, of qualification criteria, and make them somewhat formulaic, because they really are, right? And at the end of the day, what that does is it takes your team, your human capital, and it allows them to provide services, like things that provide empathy, things that create confidence, things that create certainty, because the consumer by definition is in a very emotional state and going through some ups and downs, right? And so that's the thesis. We've been applying that just very systematically throughout every part of the experience. And, we're seeing the results. We're saving our team members about 1 million hours annually. And we expect that to increase probably geometrically. So that creates capacity. And the thing that capacity does is it does two things. The first is it helps you build a company in a more predictable way, where you're not constantly growing and decreasing your headcount in response to market cycles. And so that's one, big benefit, is you can build something in a more durable way when it comes to your culture, your team, which I think is very important when you want to build something that's more generational. And I think the second thing is it just allows you to handle a much larger increase in volume, right? And so whether that's through activating your servicing book for recapture capabilities, being able to execute, more calls per day, more calls per month, being able to have better quality conversations, and just a lot of it is just just basic examples, right? Like our loan originators, our loan officers can just build a deeper relationship with the client. We can ask for the business in a more empathetic way. We can dig deeper with them and be strategic about options. So they can kind of think about what I would call the big questions, and the big questions are really what drive conversion. And so that's kind of the way we think about it in totality.
Varun, when I look at what you're trying to do, which is create a generational company, search, integration, and servicing, those are pretty much the three components that if you can tie them all together, you'll hit a grand slam home run. I'm really clear on the integration and the servicing and how great you guys are at retention. You're 83%. I mean, you lead the league by far. There's nobody even close. What's not as clear is how do you get to the client at point of thought? I mean, can you talk a little bit about your plans for gaining market share in those ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things that are really important, right? And I think the biggest aha for us is that the homeownership experience today is like individual industries and individual funnels. And the consumer flows through each of the funnels and they get kicked from one to the next to the next. And the reality is that these are not separate industries. They are singularly and consistently integrated for the consumer. And so for us, the big aha moment is that home search and real estate is very connected to the origination process of financing, going through title and closing, and is very connected to the servicing experience where you effectively build a lifetime relationship with a client. And so the thesis for us to raise eyeballs is to connect all three into a super funnel. It's a pretty simple thesis. And so the evidence to me comes from, how acquisitions like Redfin and Mr. Cooper can accelerate that strategy. And what they do is they do three things. The first thing is they counterbalance your company because they allow you to be able to thrive in all market cycles, right? You can make hay when the sun is shining or when it's raining because you can activate your servicing book. You can activate 62 million eyeballs that are consumers that are coming to Rocket Mortgage or Redfin. That's 62 million monthly active users that you can engage. And then, so you can counterbalance the company. The second thing is, you flood the ecosystem with data, and that data can be used to train models. Those models can be used to tune experiences. And then the third thing is you build a killer experience, right? Like today, when you go through the process of home search, working with a realtor, connecting with a mortgage broker, going through financing, providing your data and documents, getting qualified, going through the process of collecting all that information, figuring out which financial product is the right product for you. And then ultimately, title insurance, closing, I could go on. It is oftentimes the same data set that flows through the entire ecosystem. And that's a long way of saying that you could build a killer experience by just simply connecting the three, right?
But even if you've done that, you still have to get to the client, right? You still have to be able to bring in the client who's on the couch renting, who says, I want to buy a home. Yep. Where do I start to look? Is it your hope that just the name brand recognition and I've heard you talk about wanting to be the Apple of home ownership, that you get to a point where people are just like fait accompli. Oh, that's Rocket. Let me go there, because that's a huge bet when you have so many people already integrated in communities getting that lead before you.
Right. I think the key is to build an ecosystem. And if you think about the Rocket ecosystem in totality, 50 million monthly active users are searching for a home on Redfin every month.
That's right.
50 million.
Yep.
When you add Rocket to that, that's 62 million. So that is a huge distribution to consumers. That's leads for realtors. That's leads for mortgage brokers. Those are high intent clients that are highly engaged with the product. When you add to that the servicing book that is Rocket and Mr. Cooper combined, that's 10 million clients. That's 1 in 6 mortgages that are paying property taxes, escrows, going through forbearance. So you're engaging in totality with an incredibly powerful distribution to consumers who have a great experience with you, right? Mr. Cooper and Rocket clients have incredible experiences with servicing. I mean, that's why we win JD Power Awards, is because we love and protect and amaze those clients. So we earn the right to be able to provide them with their next purchase. And that's the recapture rate. But when you pair that with the 62 million monthly active users that are using your products and engaging with it every day, to me, it creates a very natural, high intent top of funnel to be able to drive purchase, to be able to drive refinance. So it's really just connecting those two and being able to have that distribution that allows you to generate what we think is a higher performing funnel. And that creates opportunity for the community, right? And that creates opportunity for the real estate community. That creates opportunity for the mortgage broker community. Like we want to build an open ecosystem, not a closed ecosystem. We want to enable choice.
There's also Rocket Money as well. And so you've got your pulse on spending habits. I mean, to me, of all the great things you guys have done, that thing, man, there's a lot of super glue inside of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, Greg, because, Rocket Money to me is a little bit of the glue that connects each of the parts of the ecosystem, because when you're going through the process of preparing to get ready to buy a home or even stay in a home, what does it require? It requires you to have healthy savings. It requires you to have high credit, right? It requires you to have, a balanced portfolio with investments. And so, having a personal finance management AI-driven companion like Rocket Money, it guides you along the journey as you're kind of in and around the home ownership experience as well. And that's another 5 million monthly active users that are part of the Rocket ecosystem.
So both these deals, Redfin and Rocket, were announced on Mondays. And I'm curious to know how you slept the night before, knowing that the news was coming the following day. I'm serious. Like, do you just barrel right through and sleep 8-9 hours, or is it the kind of thing where you can't seem to fall asleep? You're tossing and turning with excitement.
Yeah, no, I think that the weekend before was definitely, your mind is racing. You're thinking about what's possible and what's going to happen. And I think the key is just to focus on what you can control. I would say there were a few butterflies for sure. We're talking legacy defining companies who share our vision for the future of home ownership, and just the privilege of being able to, deliver it to their expectations and to welcome them to the company, and how our company is going to react to it. And so there's a little butterflies, but I think the thing that helped me sleep is just conviction. I think what we're doing. I thought you were going
to say melatonin.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work too well for me. I've tried it. I've tried a lot of things, but I find the routine is the main thing for going to sleep early. You got to try to stay off the phone, make sure you stick to a routine, do certain things before, like lighting and other things like that.
Are you able to stick to a routine? I mean, are you a guy that gets up in the morning, works out, eats a healthy breakfast? Like, are you of that mindset that how you start your day is how you finish it?
I am. I'm definitely a morning person. I do believe in that sort of own the morning, own the day. So I tend not to sleep too late, but I usually wake up pretty early.
Yeah.
Morning exercise is definitely a routine. I feel like it gets you going the right way. I think choosing when you want to intentionally engage in work is another thing. Sometimes you the first thing most of us do when you wake up in the morning is you reach over and grab your phone. And what's interesting is, your mind you're not fully awake yet. So I've read that sometimes you're a little more in a suggestive state. And so what I've been doing sometimes is like waking up first, waiting a little bit, and then looking at my phone when I am sort of in a more intentional state. And then it's a way of making sure that you control your environment instead of letting it control you. But the morning routine to me is super important. And I think how you start the day, it sets the pattern, I think, for how the rest of the day is going to go.
Oh, there's no question. What's a day in the life like for you? Obviously, you've been through, quite a run here since the first announcement was made. I believe it was on March the 10th. But how has that changed the day in the life? Before you were doing less interviews, now you're doing a lot of interviews, and now you've got the tough work to do, right? Because you've got the integration process. So there's that excitement, and you talk about what you just mentioned, the excitement of delivering. Well, delivering between the announcement and making sure the integration of multiple companies into one ecosystem is not flawless, because it never will be, but is the success that you hope it will be? What is it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, every week you go through kind of a balanced checklist of things, right? Like you have to move a number of things along, and you just want to make sure that your time is organized around moving them along to the best of your ability. And so, what that looks like for me is, a lot of time with with Mr. Cooper and Redfin, connecting directly with CEOs on how we feel like things are progressing on, a number of different work streams. And we have obviously a huge number, organizational, strategy, regulatory, et cetera, et cetera. And so just making sure that that's moving down the line with progress every single day, decisions getting made, obstacles getting unblocked. And I'd say that's probably 50+% of my time.
Yeah. How would you describe your leadership style?
I would say, I am largely an inclusive leader who likes to listen first and then weigh in when it feels like things need to be sped up or slowed down. I tend to value interaction with my team. I like to get input from folks before making big decisions. I'm probably a little more of a measure twice, cut once philosophical approach, but I believe that life is short and you got to take big swings, while you're on this earth. And so, to me, I would say, inclusive leadership style, healthy appetite for risk, and I care a lot about say-do ratios. I when people say that they're going to do something, I expect that they're going to do it. And I don't expect that things are going to go perfectly, but I do expect that bad news should always travel faster than good. And so
there's nothing worse than having you asking people to do something and then having to go and not having the confidence so that you've got to go back and make sure they've done the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where escalation is so important. Like, I think it's important to have a culture that something going wrong or an issue happening is not celebrated, but communicated faster than things going well. I think sometimes it's really easy for us to focus or hide behind the things that are going well. And there's just a little bit of a fear around, well, if this went wrong or I missed this, like what's going to happen? And I think if you're willing to forgive that and just say, let's learn, it's okay to make mistakes, let's just make new mistakes.
Yeah.
I think creating that kind of a leadership environment has been something that is important to me.
What about meetings? How do you view meetings? I mean, some days I look at my calendars and it's 60 minutes after 60 minutes after 60 minutes. There's a lot of money tied up in those meetings. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of philosophy on this, that some people are pro meeting, some people are anti meeting. I think that it's important that you have, whatever you do, you're constantly learning and tweaking. So if you have meetings, like, don't just have them and then if they don't go well, fester. Like, have a reflection period where you're constantly evaluating your operating system. And I think of meetings as a part of an operating system. Like running a company, you have a bunch of different operating rhythms, right? Like you have some things that you're going to do to engage and motivate your team members and build community. There's some things you're going to do to make sure you're driving long-term strategy. There's some things that you have to do to ensure there's a day-to-day rigor of execution. So you're going to have meetings that cover, a wide spectrum of these types of things. I think the key is to always be like, hey, is this working? Is this not working? Is this meeting happening? Is it adding value? Is it not? Do we have the right attendees? Is it the right length? Is it the right topics? Do we need to have it? Should we cancel it? And so thinking about your operating system, I think, as like a living, breathing thing is the most important, because you're going to design an operating rhythm.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's going to work for a while, and then some things are not going to work, or you're going to bring in new
folks. Sometimes it's not working. When it's not working, you hit you. That's why you put your finger on that power button on the computer. It takes an extra couple of seconds, right?
Yep.
But it shuts down. And that's necessary. Back to Rocket Redfin for a minute. Which deal took longer from beginning to end?
Mr. Cooper took longer from beginning to end. I would say they're both significant acquisitions, and they're different parts of the funnel, and so they're quite different in some sense.
Yeah.
But the absolute size and scale and complexity of Mr. Cooper just being a larger company, there's just more detail. There's more implications. I would say they were both very complex, and both, I think required a lot of relationship building and trust with Glenn, with Jay, who I spent a lot of time with. And so I think, it started as good conversations with like-minded leaders and just learning and growing. And it evolved to, I would say, a friendship, a partnership, trust, and then a mutual view on the future of home ownership. And so I think there's something cool about just the solidarity that I think we need in the community. I mean, Greg, you really represent that, and one of the reasons I love your podcast is because, even just all of us behind you, to me, it speaks to the fact that, choice, community, ecosystem matter. And as we looked at, these companies as well as other companies, we want to be a friend to the industry, right? We want to be someone who enables more professionals to succeed and thrive and prosper. And in our view, this working with Glenn and with Jay, from my perspective, is an example of that.
Yeah. So, I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you. That's very meaningful coming from you to hear those words. So I'm in the the retail community, right? So a lot of your business is through the broker channel and TPO and things like that. So how should folks in the IMB space view Rocket, and what opportunities are there for alliances?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sky is the limit. I think we're just getting started on that. Like I would say, in the past, Rocket, probably for better or for worse, has been a little more closed. And I think that we've done some good things with partners, but I think we can do so much more, right? And I think fundamentally, the ecosystem and enabling it is a fundamental thesis for the next chapter of growth for the company. And the inorganic examples of what we're focused on now are in service to that as well. And so when you think about the broker community, that's another great example of that. In fact, even today, I don't know when this podcast will air, but literally today, we have some pretty exciting announcements around expanding the Rocket TPO offering to the Arrive platform. And that's another example of where we want to enable more brokers with choice.
That's a very big deal. That's the LOS used by brokers, by some brokers, but you've created a partnership with Arrive, I understand.
That's right. And
you're so excited about that?
Today. We are very. And, I think it just speaks to our strategy. We care about meeting our clients where they are and building products and services that map to the entirety of the housing industry. And there's plenty of room for everyone. I think this is an industry that has a little more of an antagonistic competitive dynamic than it probably needs to have. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to think about doing things together and maybe think in new ways and develop new business models and partnerships. So the Arrive integration and partnership is something that we're super excited about as an example. And we just want to enable more choice. You have thousands of brokers that trust that platform to be able to shop and compare products, and we're excited to participate.
Well, you mentioned the acrimony in the industry. There's far too much infighting. I have to ask you about Matt Ishbia's comments once the Mr. Cooper deal was announced. He said it was fantastic, but not good for brokers. And I think to this point you've had no comment. So, my question to you is, just head down. Moving forward, keeping all the noise. Is there a point where the noise gets so loud you've got to answer it? And do you have anything to say about that comment?
Look, I think all I would say is just I've grown up believing you always respect your competitors, and I think it's great to have competition in all spaces. And I actually think when I think about the industry at large, our biggest competitor in my view is ourselves. It's our own execution. It's our own mindset. It's our own perspective. And I'm just very focused on making sure that we do awesome things for our clients, for our partners in our ecosystem. So I to be honest with you, don't spend a lot of time thinking about just like other companies in housing per se. It's more just how do we accelerate our work and do good things together. But I think just fundamentally, when you look at what these acquisitions represent for brokers, I would think that it's extremely exciting. It's more technology capability, servicing capabilities, a bigger top of funnel, more powerful lead generation engines, the combination of which you can create more competitive products and services that can allow brokers to be successful. So I'm a very sort of optimistic person when it comes to.
Sounds like I need to get you an all of us t-shirt.
That's what it sounds
I'm ready.
Like. I'm ready.
Sounds
man.
like you need an all of us t-shirt. I know we're running out of time here. I know your schedule's probably packed. You've got speech writing in your background. I wanted to cover this because that really fascinated me. Where does that love come from? I mean, and who's a speaker, a president, or someone you thought was a great orator?
Yeah, the orator I'll have to come back to. I have to think about that a little bit. But I would say I kind of fell into it kind of randomly. I was in a different I was in the product profession, and I was just doing some work with an executive, and just randomly had an opportunity for interviewing. And but I've liked storytelling, I would say, in general, and I've liked the art of communication very much, because I think the way you communicate to somebody is oftentimes the way you build an empathetic and emotional connection, and I think it's very important to building relationships, to building trust, to leadership in general. And so I was at Microsoft. I did some speech writing for the senior leadership team there, and early in my career, and it was a super fun learning experience. You learn a lot about building trust in relationships. You learn a lot about different communication styles. You learn how to work hard in high pressure situations where there's not a lot of room for failure. And I think you develop also I developed a lot in just understanding how to do good product demos and understanding things like visual design, animation, motion. And I think it's been a helpful skill that I'm grateful for that experience.
All right.
Who's your favorite orator? I got to ask.
I thought Ronald Reagan was a great speaker, and Obama too. I mean, when you talk about politicians, they made sense, they landed, they were genuine. I'm also a big John Maxwell fan. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. What's a podcast that you listen to that you like?
So I would say I'm an amateurish poker player, but I like the All In podcast. That's one that I listen to on a regular basis. Cool. Chamath, Jason, and co. I think they do a great job. And they use a lot of poker analogies, which I like.
All right. Last thing, promise. This is really the last thing. So your team's probably waving and, waving their arms in the background. I'm so sorry to the team, and I'm so grateful for them. You've said yes to Housing Wire again. You're going to be the keynote speaker coming up at the gathering June 8th to the 11th. And it just, the question is, why'd you say yes to that? Why are you carving out time to be there for Housing Wire and to address the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it was an easy decision. I think it's important that when you play a role in the industry that you engage with the industry and you engage with the community. And so for me, simply being with Housing Wire is an opportunity to meet people, to hear their perspective, and to explain our strategy, and to invite them to be a part of the journey. And I think that's an important stage for us to be able to do that together. And so it's as much about learning, I think, as it is about communicating for me. And, I think, frankly, for me also, a little bit selfishly, it's been about 18 months since I've been in the role. I've been very focused on strategy and execution, and I want to be more deliberate about engaging with the community this coming year. And so that's one of the goals I have in terms of my time management and focus areas.
Oh, amazing. Great to talk to you. I really appreciate your time. You're so generous with it, and how you're stepping out into the community and sharing your plays. You're not just running the plays, you're sharing them and trying to impact the consumer. And that's really at the bedrock of all of us. It's all of us for the consumer, right? No more fighting. Just let's focus on delivering the best experience. And clearly you've got your laser focused on that. Varun, I can't wait to meet you in Colorado Springs. Thank you to you. Thank you to your team, and continued success.
Congrats on all your success as well, Greg. Big fan of the podcast, and happy to be on anytime in the future.
I really appreciate that so much. Take care. Have a great day.
My pleasure. You too.
All right. Bye-bye now.